2. All right, everyone. Welcome to the new JFK show. We're going to call this a number 250 because it's so doggone important. I like the round number, and we'll fill in for 249 next week. All right, we've got an hour to go. Ralph is on the trail of exonerating Jack
Ruby. Thank you all
Ruby.
for having me. It's great to see you, Gary, Jim, Larry, and we have an invisible participant tonight, the one who basically spurred this coverage, and that is the man that we call the Wizard. And he came up with a good find today, and I'll explain the importance of it and the value that it has. But there's a narrative involved with this that I think is quite interesting. And since I don't have that many images to show, I'm going to just share the whole narrative. And it started when I was wondering like crazy. By the way, am I being heard okay?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me well? Okay.
Yeah, better than ever.
Why is it that we don't have any images of FBI agent James Bookhout? I knew that he attended the first interrogation with Oswald along with another FBI agent, James Hosty. But after that first interrogation, Hosty disappeared. But Bookhout continued coming, and he was the official liaison of the FBI with the Dallas police throughout the investigation. He attended all of the Oswald interrogations. He attended the, what do you call it again, the lineups. He attended the lineups. He attended the fingerprinting and the
press conferences.
The mugshot. He was at the midnight press conference. So this is a guy that was pretty much following Oswald like his shadow, and yet we did not have any images of him.
Yeah, no.
So I started searching like crazy, and then I got the thought, wait, maybe at least I can find a picture of him on his obituary. So I find his obituary, but there was no images of him there either. Now, when his wife died, there was an image of her, but not for him. There was no image. And of course, that must be because he gave the order before he died that don't publish any image of me. So, you know, what I did was something that I have done repeatedly, and that is when I am trying to figure out, when I have a question that I'm trying to answer, I start wondering if anybody else asked the same question. So I started doing searches for why are there no pictures of Jim Bookhout? And that led me to a discussion thread on the education forum. Remember our old battleground, Jim?
Where we got booted from.
Yeah, we all got booted from, all three of us, right? Well, somebody had started a thread there saying, where are the pictures of James Bookhout? I can't find a thing. Well, some guy, and I don't remember his name. I can sort of remember his image, but he was a very advanced member who had all kinds of accolades connected to him.
Simpkin?
No, it wasn't Simpkin, though. I know Simpkin. Yeah, Simpkin is, the guy who kind of started the whole thing. But I don't remember who it was. But it was somebody who said, look, if you want to see a picture of Bookhout, go to this video, and there's a link to the video, and Oswald is going to go up to him and ask him a question in the hall. Now, the situation was Saturday evening, the 23rd, Oswald was being taken to Fritz's office yet again to have an interrogation. The time was 6:30 p.m. He was still in just a t-shirt, and they bring him out of the elevator room. Now, I may have said this before, but I think it's important that at the time, it was designed, the building, that there was a public elevator that came up to the 3rd floor if you had business there, a big public elevator. But there was a private elevator room that was only for the police that went to the higher floors, the 4th and the 5th floors, which is where they had the jail. And this was a place that was only for the police. It was an elevator only for the police.
Ralph, before you continue, let's establish for our audience who might not even be aware of this, that the excuse that was given for Oswald for any of the interrogations not being recorded or even a stenographer being present is because supposedly Fritz's office was too small.
Yeah, Jim
Well, I've
Garrison.
heard different excuses.
Okay, when you know, and even in those days, you know, tape recorders were, you know, small enough, you know, to fit into an office like that, you know, and this time and day where everything is recorded, you know, nothing is left out, you know, it seems like ludicrous, you know, that something
Well,
like
in that case, let me share with you a personal story. I can remember the year was 1961. And my father, who was a New York City policeman, came home with our first tape recorder. And it was very small.
Mm-hmm.
We had never seen such a thing before. And he took it out and he set it up. And the first thing he recorded was my sister singing a song from Swan
Mary
Lake.
Lamb.
I love you.
Yeah, they're just
I
about
want
the size of a cigar box back in those days. Look,
Okay, so that's what she sang, and that's what he recorded. It was 1961, and it was a very small little box. So that excuse is just total BS.
Right. So, yeah, the point being in all this is that, you know, Lee Oswald not being recorded in any of the interrogations is just bullshit.
yeah, and that's something that Jim Garrison was all over. He brought that up every time he had a chance.
And of course, the reason was that they were afraid that Oswald was going to say something, and it would be like letting the genie out of the bottle if he said something that was going to be extremely exonerating,
yeah,
or vindicating to others. So you see.
So what does Jim have to say about that?
Well, I think you guys are right on top of this. I just love what Ralph has done with this. I just love it. I'm just so enjoying sitting back and taking it all in.
Well, let me give you guys another impression that I have of
tonight.
Oswald interrogations. I really think that Bookhout, even though he wasn't the face of it, Fritz was. And in fact, he was so much not the face of it that we don't even see his face. But
yeah,
I'd like to say that I really think that the whole direction of the interrogation was actually controlled, managed, and directed by Bookhout and not by Fritz. Because look, Fritz was he was a criminal investigator, and I'm going to assume that for most of his career, I mean, he was probably relatively legit. Now here he had a guy who was basically suspected of 2 murders. And on the very first interrogation, what kind of questions are coming out? What were you doing in Russia? Fair play for Cuba committed.
Right.
I mean, what stuff
What do
like
those
that?
have to do with the murders?
There wasn't one word about where were you when Tippett got killed. I mean,
Right.
Yeah,
because he knew the answer would be Texas Theater, which meant he couldn't have done it.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the interrogations. Okay, let's not forget that Roger Craig, for crying out loud, was brought up, okay, to confront Oswald, okay, at the time, when he said, okay, you know, I saw him running away from the Texas School Book Depository and get into a Rambler, you know, and
No, yeah, right.
You know, and he was brought in here, and at the time, you know, Lee Oswald, well, now everybody's gonna know who I am, okay?
No, and they're gonna know the car, you know, and don't drag her into that, you know.
Right, you know, so all these things that, you know, that we have so vaguely, you know, we have such a vague perception, okay, of what happened. Then you got the other guy, Postal Inspector Holmes, who was also in on the interrogation. What the hell was he doing in there, you know?
Right, why exactly would you need a postal inspector in an interrogation?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you realize that there's very little real, I mean, there are some reports about what was said at the interrogations. But if you look, for example, at the Fritz notes, there's actually nothing where they just asked him outright, did you kill Kennedy? Did you shoot Tippett? If you didn't, where were you then? Another big void is they asked him detailed questions about how he got from Dealey Plaza to his room. But they never asked a word about how he got from Dealey Plaza, from his room to the theater. Now the story became that he walked there, we never.
Yeah. We know better than that, Larry.
We have no idea to this
Gary and I walked that trajectory.
Because he would have had to deviate so far out of his way to get to the Tippett location, it would have been absurd.
Gary and I did a timeline, a study on that.
Stopwatch.
Oh, no,
Stopwatch.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, the story goes that he was walking down 10th or Patton, which is the one that he was walking down?
10th and
which is the one that ran, toward, the street that the theater was on. But I mean, theoretically, he was, according to the official story, he had no thought of going to the theater, and the theater is just a place that he ducked into to get off the street.
It came to him.
So in that case, where was he going when he was walking along and Tippett stopped him? What was his destination? You would think that would have been part of the interrogation, but no, there's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing in there to convey how Oswald got from his room to the theater, and to me, it suggests that there's something in there that they did not want disclosed. Mm-hmm. For example, somebody may have probably gave him a ride. I don't know who it was, but somebody must have given him a ride, because Butch Burroughs places Oswald in the theater by 1:07. Mm-hmm. And he didn't get to his room until 1, so he could not have covered like 1/10 mile in that amount of time. And another interesting thing that John Armstrong points out is, it was a gorgeous, sunny November afternoon in Dallas. If he had actually walked all the way from his room to that theater, somebody would have seen him. Somebody would have, recalled, I saw him walking along there. And that's another big void in the interrogations. But anyway.
Let me ask you, Ralph, real quick. Ralph, just knowing how these photos go, does Oswald have a black eye, or do we have more photo manipulation?
Do you mean in this image?
Right there.
Well, it's hard to say, really. I can't. In other words, he should have a black eye there. That's the left eye.
It's puffed up, yeah. Right? Swollen.
Yeah.
The only thing I see is his eyebrows look a little blacker than normal, but I don't really see the kind of swelling that he had a pretty bad contusion there. So
yes, he looks like he's been in a fight.
Let me tell you something, guys. There are quite a few photos in which they doctored it so that
yes, that's what Judy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. There are quite a few. Yeah. So that may be true in this case as well. But let me finish telling you the narrative how this goes, though, because it's actually eerie. It's actually surreal. So Saturday evening, they bring Oswald out of this private elevator room, bringing him down from the 5th floor. And as soon as he enters, the corridor is full of reporters and police. And you hear a reporter say, "There he is, Lee Oswald." And he says it. What it reminds me of is the way Ed McMahon would introduce Johnny Carson. "Here's Johnny." Yeah, it sounds cheery, it sounds chipper, and it is so divorced from
right on cue, huh?
That anybody thinks this guy was a double murderer. Okay, I mean, it was just so casual and light, and it almost sounded like there was, I don't know, fondness for him. He just seemed like So all right, so after this very warm welcome, at least on the tape, one of these Fritz guys with the white hats, probably Boyd, has got Oswald's arm, and the idea is they're going to head down the corridor to the entrance to the homicide bureau so that they can get into Fritz's office. But Oswald sees this short guy here And on his own power, he kind of changes direction and he pulls away from Boyd and goes to talk to him. Now, this is the only time in the 2 days that Oswald was in custody that he ever sought to talk to anybody. There were times that he talked to people like reporters, but only when they went to him and asked him a question. This is the only time that Oswald actually went to talk to somebody else. Now, I want to point out that he would not have done that to a reporter because he didn't know any reporters, and he would not have had anything to ask or say to a reporter. Whoever it was, it had to be somebody he knew. And the only one he could possibly have known was someone that was part of the interrogations, and probably someone who was a regular part of the interrogations, someone that he really got to know. And the only one that could be was Bookhout, because the only one besides Fritz who attended all the interrogations was Bookhout. Everyone else attended either just one or maybe two, but not everyone.
Yeah.
And Oswald was, it's very possible that he knew Bookhout even before the assassination because he knew Hosty. Hosty's name and address and phone number were in his phone book. So if he knew Hosty, it's very possible that he actually knew Bookhout before any of this happened. But
excuse me, Ralph. Also, let's not forget that Warren DeBruys from New Orleans actually went with Lee Oswald at the same time when Lee Oswald moved from New Orleans to Dallas. Okay, so.
All right, okay, that's good. All right, that's good.
Yeah,
all right,
really
so what we have here is Oswald diverting away. You might say he's going 90 degrees away. The direction that they were going is deep through this picture. In other words, down that corridor. And what's happened here is that Oswald, on his own volition, has veered now to his left, and he has stopped to talk to this man. And what he says to him is this. He says, what have you got against Broby? That's what it sounds like, B-R-O-B-Y. Now, for him to ask a question like that implies that they were talking about Broby previously, and he is continuing the conversation that was started. So he's going up to Bookhout, and he asks him that question. And we're seeing Bookhout here on the left. Now you can see that Bookhout is short. He was, my guess is that he was no more than my height, which is 5'6". He may have been a little shorter than that. But the reason we know he was short is two things. First, Hosty said in his report that on the 22nd, that Bookhout was looking for him in this very hallway, trying to find him, and that he had to stand on a pedestal to do it. Now, if he was a tall man, he would not have had to stand on a pedestal. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that Bookhout himself said that he was at the motorcade. He was standing on Main Street outside the Mercantile Bank, but that he never laid eyes on JFK because there were some people in front of him. Well, if he was a tall guy, he would have had no trouble seeing despite people in front of him. So he was a short guy, and he would have been right around this height. He was 49 years old, and that's consistent with what we're seeing here basically in this guy. And this is the only guy that Oswald stops and talks to. And so going by what that guy from Education Forum said, this must be the person that he was talking about as being James Bookhout. Now, you notice that it looks like his eyes are closed. You don't see any eyeball. It looks like his eyes are tight.
He's blinking, like he's blinking his eyes.
Right. Now, I suppose there's a chance that that's spontaneous. But I'm very suspicious that that's a doctored thing that they did so that we wouldn't see his eyes and we wouldn't make him, because, eyes contribute a lot to a person's look. And so it would have been very useful to
It does
close
look
his
a little
eyes.
blushed,
Second thing, I want you to notice how long his hair is. His hair there is covering the top of his ear. It's growing over his ear. We're not seeing the total ear. We're seeing hair over his ear. Now, this was 1963, and we know that all of these law enforcement guys, including the Dallas police, including the FBI,
Their hair short.
they all had very, very closely cropped hair, razor short, all of them, every single one. So the idea that he'd be going up to an FBI agent who had his hair like that, I will tell you, is impossible. That is more photographic fraud to cover up his ear and to just mislead about, how he was.
Hey, Ralph, hold that thought right now, because since we have a lot of time, and you have very few slides here, I want to focus on this guy here that's in the foreground here with his back towards us. This guy, he was a detective, from the sheriff department. His name was M.H. Hall.
Right. Absolutely. You're right.
Okay. And I've had one particular person, researcher, who was a New York detective and who was very familiar with means that were used at the time to change your appearance, and that kind of thing, sort of like in Mission Impossible and stuff like that. However, besides that, he has identified this guy actually as William Colby. Okay. And
wow.
we did some overlays, and I'm talking about 3 or 4 years ago. We did some overlays.
And they were good?
Yeah. And I passed them around to some people, and they said, it looks like William Colby. Now, in some of the videos, some of the Midnight Conference video that survives today, you can see this guy whispering things to Oswald, instructions, if you will. Okay.
Well, let's remember now that there were 3 guys who were Oswald's
because
handlers.
he had him in his arm throughout the whole night,
Right, yeah, I remember that. But the 3 handlers for Oswald were Boyd, Sims, and Hall.
Right.
Now, Boyd and Sims both worked privately for LBJ.
There you go.
They did private security for him. We have a photograph that the Wizard found, which shows, I think, Sims standing right behind LBJ at like a speech. I mean, he was practically breathing down his neck.
Right. And this guy Hall, we found out that the weekend of the assassination, he supposedly stayed home, at the time, and our investigator here that I was just mentioning, he did extensive research on this guy, and he sent all this information to me, and he said, why don't you do some overlays on this guy? And I did, and the percentage, I believe, came up to close to 90%. Okay.
And of course, what happened to Colby, right?
Yeah, of course. And at the time, and then I had other pseudo researchers at the time who said to me, "Wait a minute, Colby was in Vietnam at the time, so there's no way he could have been in Dallas." Yeah, that's a lot of horse shit,
That's a good cover story.
Right.
You're saying this is the same William Colby who'd become director of the CIA?
The CIA, that's what he's saying.
Absolutely.
You're kidding me.
Yes. Sitting there talking to Oswald, comforting him. I believe he was comforting him. Just work with us.
When Ralph ends his slides, I can show you guys, what
All right, well, then we'll just proceed then. Okay, all right, go to the next slide now. Oh, that's on me. All right, what do I mean? All right, now I included this one. It's part of the progression.
It didn't change for me. There
No, it did, yeah.
All right. You remember how movie cameras worked in those days, and I don't know if they still work that way or not, but basically a movie camera just took a series of still pictures, you know, maybe 28 in a second, and basically the movement comes from just rifling them one after the other, and it looks like a movie. So this is a frame. But what I want you to notice about this particular frame is that all the distinguishing features of the face of Bookhout are completely absent.
Absolutely.
You don't
Absolutely.
see anything here that it's just like a blank slate. I mean, and that
Excellent.
is truly photographically impossible when you think about
Excellent.
the fact that a face is
Excellent.
a three-dimensional object with a lot of different
Completely obliterated.
contours. They decided to just basically wipe him out. Now,
Wow.
why would they do that if he was anyone else but Bookhout? There's just absolutely no reason why they would. There's no doubt that that they were basically obscuring him.
Yeah.
Now, notice in this case on Oswald, we don't see any damage to that eye at all. I mean, they really just makes it look like he was never, you know, touched. So
There's a difference in skin tones also.
doctoring that went into that
Yeah.
as well. All right, let me go to the third now. All right, now this is the third one. Okay, this comes back again. They're still talking. And all this time, supposedly, Bookhout has got his eyes closed. There was a lot of doctoring, I think, done to this image. His eyebrow looks very weird. It's thick and it's short. The hair, again,
completely stops right there in the middle of the eye.
right, it stops right in the middle of the eye. Now the hair is covering even more of the ear. It's going halfway down the ear.
This is a caricature.
Now, you know, a man would have to have awfully long hair.
This is a caricature. It's pretty obvious.
Just go out of your way to, and the idea that he or anyone would do that is just ridiculous. That is just total, you know, cover up. And it's, again, this thing about him standing there with his eyes closed is, again, I think part of the obscuring of him so that we don't recognize him as who he is. Now,
but you know something, Ralph, you can still see that little trickle there in the earlobe.
yeah, that's right. Now, I brought this one along because this is what made me so appreciative of the work the wizard did. I tried to make a comparison collage between these two. So on the left, we have Bookhout. This is from this footage of Oswald on Saturday night in that hallway. And I want you to notice then on both of them, you're seeing kind of a fat neck, that there's some overhang of skin and subcutaneous fat that is pretty consistent between the two of them. But on the left, the ear is just completely blunted. It really is just totally blunted.
It's not even there. Wait a minute, it's not even there.
It's not even. It's almost like he has no ear. I mean, if you look real close, you see a little bit of protrusion, but it doesn't look like an ear, and it's certainly nothing that the camera could have done. So yeah, this is another example of how they did this. But there's one little thing, and I don't know how well the audience can see it, but if you will try your best to
you can put your cursor over it.
Yeah, okay. What I'd like you to try to do is to just, we're seeing his face essentially in profile here. What I want you to do is just look at the course of the line of the profile where you have a little bit of supraorbital skull, the bridge, the brim of the orbital brim, and then you've got the sulcus for the eye, And then you've got a little bit of prominence for the cheek. And then it just comes straight down for the rest of his maxillary area. And it's exactly the same here. The same length, and then the same sulcus, and then again, just a little bit of prominence for the cheek, and then the same straight shot down. It's very, very well matched between the two. If you're looking at the course of the line of his anterior profile there. So I'm liking this very, very much as a correlation. Now you notice that because he's an FBI agent and they were all razored close, you're seeing it's almost like he's bald in the back of his head. But over here, this guy's got all this dark hair.
There's no hairline, period.
Well, this is we believe, the wizard and I believe that he put on a toupee, that he wore a toupee, and this is why his hair looks thick and long back here compared to what we see here. Now, here's the piece de resistance. This is what the wizard found. He found a frame in which we've got some good definition of the ear. And I want to explain to you why I think this is a very good match of the ear. Note, first of all, that ears are very distinctive, that they're highly...
It's like a fingerprint. It's like a fingerprint.
Like a fingerprint. They come in all shapes, sizes, contours, and they just run the gamut. And in this case, there's several elements that I think are worth noting. First of all, the cartilage on the outside of your ear, which runs around the periphery of the ear, is called the helix, H-E-L-I-X. And in his case, there's a relatively slender helix on both. But what happens is that as the helix descends, that right about when it reaches the meatus of the ear, it gets even more slender. So over here, for instance, if you look where I'm running the cursor, it really gets very, very attenuated.
You're talking about morphology.
Right here.
Ralph, you're talking about morphology.
Right, morphology. There's very, very thin cartilage right here. And then the lower part of the ear is known as the lobule. That's the fleshy part where the earring goes if you wear an earring. And on both of them, there's a short lobule with a very acute curvature to the inside. And the whole shape of the ear is bowed on both of them. So in other words, there is a convexity. So the bow, so in other words, it's bowing to our left at the top, and then you have the bow, and then it's basically bowing in at the bottom. And it's this now. This is the opposite ear.
Right.
I want to point out to you that with ears, it doesn't matter.
You can have
it's very, very usual that
right.
there is tremendous symmetry between ears. Now, it's not true of the nose. If you compared the right side to the left side of most people's noses, you would see a lot of asymmetry. You would see asymmetry in the size and shape of the nostril. You would see asymmetry in each half of the nasal tip cartilage. And you would see just a lot of difference in the angle of the nose. It's almost like we have two different noses that have been fused together. And there are exceptions. There are people who have a lot of symmetry in the nose. Oswald actually had quite a lot of symmetry between the two sides of his nose. But it's not uncommon for there to be a lot of asymmetry. But with the ears, everybody has good symmetry. So it doesn't matter that this is a right ear and that is a left ear. So basically that shape of the ear in which it's bowed, which it has the very slender cartilage, and it has the small lobule and
Mhm.
it's a very, very, very good match.
I would say
those
a very
two
good
players. And I
identifier.
never saw that before today. It's only
Ralph,
because
I would call this a very good identifier.
I would call this, you might say, a clincher is really what it is. I
Well,
mean, there's
after,
no way that this much likeness.
well,
I'll
after,
give you guys an example of something.
Ralph, but after the work that you did with the shoes, I mean, this is, what else do you need?
Why, you'd have to be nuts. Well, I'm going to give you an example of something. I'll try to be quick about it. It's a little off subject, but we're all 9/11 truthers here, right?
Absolutely.
You know, there's a strange story about this Solicitor General, what's his name? Ted, his wife died on Flight 77. Her name, what was her name again? Jim, you ought to know. Jim.
Yeah, who are you
What was
talking
the
about?
name of
Barbara
the-
Honegger?
What?
Barbara Honegger?
Yeah, Barbara. Barbara was her name.
Yeah.
She's the one who claimed that they were using box cutters. I mean, I'm pretty sure she's the one who said, yeah, they had box cutters. Well, she, supposedly died on Flight 77. And, they had a funeral for her. And then, you can't mourn forever. So a couple years, I don't know, some period of time later, he marries this European woman who looks a lot like Barbara in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah, I know.
A lot like her. She goes by Lady something. She's got a title. She's Lady somebody. And she wears her hair differently than Barbara did. She's slender. If she's Barbara, she definitely took off, I'm going to say, good 15, maybe 20 pounds.
Yeah.
She parts her hair, sweeps it over the other direction. And she may have also had a nose job. Yeah, there are definitely differences, but people have done an analysis. And if you look at the center of her face and the lay of her lips and her teeth and her smile, it's eerily the same.
Yeah.
And it's just uncanny to think that he would have met a woman who looked that much. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the movie Vertigo. Remember Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock?
Yeah.
The woman dies, and then, lo and behold, he runs into her lookalike.
Yeah. Well,
And,
what goes through my mind about all this is that how many times have we seen Lavelle interviewed? How many times have we seen Fritz? Everybody's been interviewed. Everybody's been on the History Channel, but no book out.
No, never. And not only that, but think about this, Gary. When they had the mock trial of Oswald in England in 1984, that's the biggest, fanciest one that was ever done. It was a commercial project.
Yeah.
It was done to make money. It went on English television for 2 weeks. And they paid those people to go over there and testify. They paid them well. Hosty went. Lots of people went. Of course, Fraser went.
You mean Fritz? Fritz went?
I'm sure Bookhout wanted to go. He could have gone and gotten paid and
Fritz.
been on TV. He didn't go. He never, ever, ever, ever went anywhere. But anyway, to finish that story about Barbara, when I compared the ears of Barbara to this lady, whatever her name is, who Ted married, the match, excellent. It's, as good as this. It's really just uncanny. So the ears don't lie. This is a very, very big find that the wizard made. All right, I'm going to show you my last image now. This is after, so what happens is so Oswald goes, he wants to talk the Bookhout in the hall, but before Bookhout can answer, Webb, now he gets, he basically tugs Oswald away. Like, he doesn't say anything, but he basically, sends the message, hey, that's enough of this, this ain't no porch party. Let's get moving here. We've got something to do. we're trying to get you somewhere. So Oswald is already ahead of Bookhout here. Oswald's already been let into the office. So now Bookhout is filing in behind him. And so that's him. And I want you to notice how fat the neck is, how, again, big wad of overlap there from his porky neck. His neck is short. And everything about that picture is a very good match to the garage shooter of Oswald. And that's another reason why there really is no doubt at all in my mind. I am absolutely certain that that is Bookhout, and he was the garage shooter of Oswald. I don't think that he killed Oswald. I think it was all a circus. I think it was just a show for television. And I think Oswald was shot afterwards under very controlled conditions where they administered a surgical shot to do the most damage, cause the most bleeding. And they certainly didn't do it in that garage. And let me leave you with just one last thought before, Larry, you can show your images. And that is that the very idea that they would have shot Oswald in the garage is ridiculous, because Oswald was such a narrow target. I mean, we've got to stop thinking that this was a sure thing, getting Oswald shot and nobody else hurt, because he was so skinny, especially in the waist, that in that situation, all you would have to do is deviate that gun so it wasn't aimed quite right, and that bullet could have easily gone through Oswald and just clipped him and had a lot of energy left to enter Lavelle or someone else. And I'll leave you with one last thing from cinema, now that I'm a big screenwriter. There's an old movie from the 1950s called The Asphalt Jungle. It's an old gangster movie about a bank robber, and they form this team where they're going to rob this bank. And naturally, it goes awry. And there was this one guy, I forget his name, the actor, I think it was Stewart something, he plays the bank. The bank robber is this German genius, a tiny little man. I forget the actor. It might have been, what's his name? Edward G. Robinson. But they brought this big guy just as sort of like a protector, a bodyguard, and when it goes down with the police and there's an exchange of gunfire, he takes a shot to the abdomen, but it doesn't go right into his abdomen. What it does is it just clips him on the side of his abdomen. It just literally goes shallowly through the side of his abdomen and then out just a few inches beyond it. And so there was actually very little penetration. So at that point, they're all scurrying and trying to figure out what they're going to do, because they managed to escape from the scene. But you know, the police know what's happened. They're on the lookout, search for them, and at some point, this old German bank robber expresses his concern to the character who was this big guy who was shot. He says, "What about you? We got to get you to a doctor." And he says something to him, "Oh, that bullet, it just zipped in and out of me and it just got away like a fart in a high wind. And it's as if it's nothing, like it's just a scratch." Well, it wasn't bad the way Oswald's was bad, but it was more than a scratch. And basically what happens for the rest of the story is that he starts getting sick. Because, you know, you get shot in the gut, you got guts in there and there's waste in there, and that's going to start spreading around, and you're going to get peritonitis, and you're going to start, if you don't die from the blood loss, you're going to die from infection. And And if anybody doesn't want to hear this, because it's a spoiler, you can just turn it off for the next 30 seconds. But he also has a love interest in the story. And the way the movie ends is that they all split up and they go their own way. And he gets this idea that he's going to hide out at this farm in the country where his parents live. And he manages to get there, and he's got this girlfriend with him, and it's a beautiful place, and they're getting there, and they're on foot, and they're struggling, and he's struggling to get there, and finally he just collapses, and she screams, and then she runs to this farmhouse, and she say, "Help, help, help, help," and they end it just like that. So you don't even know for sure, but the implication, I think, is that he dies because in all likelihood, he was going to. But anyway, the point is that in the case of Oswald being shot in that garage, it would have been so dangerous in that situation with the lighting that they had and just with all the movement that was going on.
Yeah, but not only that, they could not take a chance because it was supposed to happen at the Texas Theater, and they could not screw up again.
Oh, yeah. No, that's another very good point, Gary, because look, if they had to make sure that the shot was lethal, because if they had shot him and it wasn't that bad and the doctors could have saved him,
yes,
how are they going to try it again? I mean,
that's it.
who in his right mind is going to believe
it's over?
Oh, isn't that a shame? He got shot again.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been ridiculous. So, yeah, it was then or never. They had to get him dead. So what they did was they applied a surgical shot where they knew they were going to capture those big fat blood vessels and burst them wide open. And then it was just a matter of stalling for time. Had to kill time so he'd keep bleeding, 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 bleeding. They pull out of that station on Commerce. The street was already blocked off to traffic. All they had to do was turn right and go 200 feet to Hardin. And they could have turned right on Hardin and gotten a straight shot to Parkland Hospital. It would have taken them right to the freeway that would have just gotten them there. But instead, they turn left. They go all the way down to the next freeway, the Pearl Freeway. They go up it a few blocks, come back down Main Street. They end up spending, 3 minutes driving what they could have accomplished in a block and a half. They were killing time for Oswald to bleed, 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 bleed. So it really is just an appalling thing, and it's just amazing that anyone could have been that cruel, but they were.
Ralph, if you stop sharing, we'll get all 4 of our images here for the close.
Oh, well, wait a second. I think Larry has something else he's going
to
do.
No, I think this is so much.
That's the time.
So
all right. So basically, what do I have to do then? Stop sharing?
Yeah, stop share.
Just do stop share.
All right, stop share. Slideshow. Where's stop share?
Should be at the bottom.
Oh, at the bottom. I think notes, comments.
It should be right in the middle.
Oh, in the middle?
Yeah.
No, I don't see it. Well, what happens if I just put it?
There you go. You did it.
That works.
All right, Larry, go ahead.
Ralph. No. I think we got enough here for tonight. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Yeah.
Ralph, you've done a lot of brilliant work, but this may be your masterpiece. Your analysis of Ruby and Lee is brilliant, completely brilliant.
You guys are my friends. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
I just want to say that this vindicates Ralph's research from so many years now.
Yeah.
I think 2 or 3 years going, and every step of the way he's been offering, more and more evidence, thanks to the wizard.
And all hail the wizard, because I'm telling you, one of the most important.
But Larry, who else in Ralph Cinque had the genius to sort this out? He is it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anybody now who can, refute this, you know, because we're talking about the
I agree. I agree. It's sensational. It's as sensational as your work on the Four Horsemen, Larry.
This is as certain as Oswald in the doorway. And that's as certain as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west.
And you know, following, you know, the science of scientific research, you know, and logic and everything, you know, that Jim has, you know, spent his whole life, you know, developing, you know, and writing about, you know, this is incredible. You know, there's just no way that this can be refuted.
No way. Thank you.
All right.
Till next time. Love you guys. Good night.
Yeah,
wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, you got to know sometimes when you're not going to top it. So we're going to go ahead and call it there. JFK 250. Thanks, Larry, Jim, and Ralph. We'll see you next time.
That was just terrific.